Little did anyone know that after the Royals won the World Series in 1985, that they wouldn't even be back in the playoffs for decades to come. Season after season of losing records, disappointing players, and questionable management from the front office followed. Battling teams with much bigger markets and higher payrolls, the Royals continued to get bullied until they hit rock bottom in 2005. 1985 wouldn't be the last we hear from the Royals, though, and they would eventually return to the playoffs. This is the story behind the rebuild. The lineup going into 2005 was less than ideal. Led by four-time All-Star Mike Sweeney, there was very little to look at. With young guns like David DeJesus, Ruben Gotay, John Buck, and Mark Teahen, anything could happen though. Teahen was the main piece of the Carlos Beltran trade that happened a year prior, and he was listed as the Royals' number 3 prospect heading into a season with low expectations. The lineup wasn't alone in this youth movement, as the pitching staff followed a similar theme. There were a couple young, exciting arms in the staff, but none bigger than the former 6th overall pick Zack Greinke, looking to improve on a solid rookie season where he pitched to a 3.97 ERA and a 1.20 ERA plus in 24 starts. The bullpen was nothing special with a lot of young arms. The lone bright spot heading into the season was Mike McDougall, a former All-Star closer for the Royals. And that's the team for 2005. With a lot of young talent, things could go really good or things could go really bad. Spoiler alert, it was the latter. Nothing really went right for the Royals, and their manager stepped down from the team in May to tend to a civil matter that was later revealed to be his involvement in an affair that led to the divorce of his neighbors. Yikes, not a good leader to build a culture around in the clubhouse. Bob Schaefer would step in as the manager before Buddy Bell was hired as full-time manager, but his job title would better fit as tank commander. The most exciting thing from the first half would be the draft, as it is for most losing teams. The Royals had the coveted 2nd overall pick, and the Diamondbacks would take high school phenom Justin Upton with the 1st overall pick, which left the Royals with the consensus 2nd best prospect in 3rd baseman Alex Gordon out of Nebraska. The second half of the season would be bad. The Royals finished with a record of 56-106, securing their spot as the worst team in the league. The season was a failure, and the pitching was at the forefront. Making matters even worse, the promising young arm of Zack Greinke struggled and clearly regressed from his solid rookie year, and his numbers weren't just bad, they were awful. Andre Sisco was one of the lone bright spots on the mound, coming out of the pen as he put up a 142 ERA plus while striking out over a batter an inning. In the offseason, the Royals would make a lot of changes. Notable free agent signings on the offense included Doug Minkiewicz, Mark Grudzielanek, and Reggie Sanders. All 3 of these players would find themselves in the starting lineup for 2006. These guys were obviously not in the long-term plan though, and were only here to fill gaps until they could find younger guys for the future. The pitching staff had a lot of new faces as well. Mike McDougall would battle injuries in spring training, which opened up the closing role for the young Ambiorix Burgos. One name you might notice that is missing is Zack Greinke, one of the only hopes the Royals had at a good pitcher. He would take almost the entire year away from baseball because of anxiety, and it was later revealed that he was struggling with it even in 2005, possibly an explanation on why he was so ineffective. Over the year, though, this staff would fluctuate heavily, as none of these 5 guys showed that they deserved a spot in a major league rotation. One high point of the first half was the MLB draft, just like last year, and this year, the Royals held the privilege of the number 1 overall pick. They passed on the consensus top talent of Andrew Miller to pick a right-hander, Luke Hochevar. Miller was rumored to want a lot of money, and the Royals didn't want to mess with that, so they took the less coveted Hochevar with this top selection. All the way in the 50th round, the last round of the draft, they selected a speedy, undersized outfielder out of Southwest Mississippi Community College named Gerard Dyson. The Royals were active at the trade deadline this time around and tried to improve the pitching staff by adding Jorge De La Rosa from the Brewers. Veterans Matt Stairs and Mike McDougall were traded as well, and they traded for Ryan Sheely, a first baseman from the Colorado Rockies. They also traded away Ruben Gotay and J.P. Howell for nothing notable. The second half of the season was much of the same as the Royals crawled to a 62-win season, another awful season with 100 losses. The pitching was bad, the offense was able to make contact and find some base hits, but the power was just not there. Last in the league in home runs and near last in OPS plus makes for a pretty bad offense. The Rays lost one more game than the Royals though, so improvement from last year, I guess? Did you hear that? That's the sound of a farm. It's time for a farm update. Oh, and by the way, we got a new farmer, or GM you could call him. Dayton Moore has taken over for Alan Baird, and the fans are understandably happy. Baird had been there since 2000, and not much progress had been made, so it's time for a new face to build this team. Moore has his background in scouting and player development, where he excelled for the successful Atlanta Braves for years before accepting the GM job in Kansas City, which is something the Royals desperately need. Looking at the top 5 prospects here for the Royals, we see some familiar faces. Alex Gordon, the second overall pick of the 2005 draft, is here, and he does look pretty good. Billy Butler was the 2004 first-rounder for the Royals, and he is also raking in the minors. Both Gordon and Butler are very close to the majors heading into 2007 season and might even make the opening day team. They both are ranked in the top 30 prospects league-wide, and following them is Luke Hochevar, the top pick of the 2006 draft. He was struggling with shoulder problems, and his prospect hype plummeted. The most recent number 1 overall pick is not even in the top 100 prospects. Tough for the Royals, who are rebuilding. On opening day, the lineup looked a lot better on paper than it did last year. Top prospect Alex Gordon was included in this lineup. Billy Butler was not here yet, but he will come very soon. While the lineup was quite similar to the previous years, the pitching staff is quite the opposite. 4 new starters anchor down the rotation: Perez and De La Rosa from the trade deadline last season, a free agent pickup in Mesh on a 5-year, $55 million deal, and they traded their closer Burgos from last season for a young controllable starter in Brian Bannister, who hasn't done much in the majors up until this point. Joakim Soria was selected from the Rule 5 draft from the Dodgers, as GM Dayton Moore saw something he liked in him. And former top prospect Zach Greinke is back in the rotation to start the year, as he is in a better place mentally and ready to start playing baseball again. Gil Mesh was selected as the lone all-star for the team, and he deserved it as he put up a pretty solid first half. The trade deadline was silent for the new GM Dayton Moore, but the draft was not. With the second overall pick, Moore's first selection as the Royals GM belonged to Mike Moustakas, a young, hit-first corner infielder. The second and third round picks were pitchers Sam Runyon and Danny Duffy, respectively. Another notable pick was 10th round selection, a pitcher by the name of Greg Holland. And with that, the second half was underway and did not go well. The team finished with an overall record of 69-93, and this year they were third to last in the league, so I guess another improvement. Gil Mesh had a phenomenal season in terms of pitching when you compare it to what the Royals were used to, and one of the most important developments of the season was that Greinke was back on track. The overall pitching staff as a whole was much improved, posting an ERA plus over 100 at 102, meaning that they were 2% better than league average, which is great considering they were dead last in that category last year. Going into 2008, the Royals were looking for that breakout year from some of their young guys. They hired a new manager, Trey Hillman, to replace Buddy Bell after 3 bad seasons. The lineup stayed mostly the same. Billy Butler had some time in the bigs in 2007, but this year he makes the opening day roster. Mesh still led the pitching staff along with Bannister and Greinke, who all had solid years in 2007. Luke Hochevar makes his major league debut with high expectations as a first overall pick. The bullpen stayed relatively the same, although 2 new pieces were brought in for late inning duties. Joakim Soria had a dominating first half, pitching to a 1.47 ERA and making the All-Star game as the Royals' lone representative. Dayton Moore once again had a couple big decisions to make in the draft, with top names like Pedro Alvarez, Buster Posey, Tim Beckham, and Eric Hosmer available. The Royals had the third selection, and after Beckham and Alvarez went 1 and 2, the Royals decided to take their chances on the Florida high school first baseman, Eric Hosmer. Mike Montgomery was selected in the second round, and Johnny G. Vitello in the third. The final record was 75-87, which was good enough for 4th in the AL Central, breaking the streak of 5 straight last-place finishes. Maybe the biggest surprise was the breakout of Micah Vilas, who came out of nowhere as a former 7th-round pick who dominated in AAA, then took over for Tony Pena at shortstop early in the season. Alex Gordon continued to build on what he had accomplished as a rookie, and the top 2 starters in the rotation were great. Mesh and Greinke were both very reliable and put up around 5 WAR each. This gave the fan base some hope with the new young core of Gordon, Vilas, and Butler, along with Greinke leading the pitching staff, but that hope would be short-lived. The 2019 was a little different, with free agent signing Miguel Olivo to take over for John Buck behind the plate. Coco Crisp was acquired via trade for reliever Ramon Ramirez, and Mike Jacobs was next to take a shot at the first base position. The starting rotation was entirely the same as it was at the end of the 2008 season, and for good reason, as the team ended the season on a hot streak. The bullpen was a little reworked alongside it with a few free agent signings. But long story short, this season was pretty much a disaster. They finished 65-97. Micah Vilas was horrible and then needed Tommy John surgery in May, which would put an end to his season. Alex Gordon injured his hip and needed surgery. Gil Mesh fell off a cliff, and the team's defense was awful. Those are the negatives, so let's look at some of the positives. Billy Butler put up an okay season with a 125 OPS+. Joakim Soria continued to be good, closing games out. Oh, and one more thing, Zach Greinke was the best pitcher in baseball. While this would not help the Royals this year, it would be a vital piece in the team's future endeavors. In the draft, the Royals had the 12th pick and selected Aaron Crow, a pitcher. Their next pick, though, would be one of the more surprising picks of the draft, and that was the selection of Will Myers in the 3rd round. He was projected to be a mid-first rounder, but fell due to bonus demands. The Royals ended up paying Myers $500,000 more than their first rounder to influence him to join the team. 2010 would unfortunately be painfully similar to 2009. The lineup was almost completely different on opening day, with Alex Gordon breaking his thumb in spring training, Mark Teahen being traded for Chris Getz, and a plethora of free agent signings. Billy Butler was moved to first base as the Royals were still searching for someone to finally take that position. As mentioned before, Gil Mesh fell off hard in the 2009 season and got his chance in 2010, but continued to struggle. Chen was brought in free agency to shore up the rotation, and the bullpen had some young arms in it. But that about ends it for the positives this year, as the team put up another abysmal season to the tune of a 67-95 record, as they found themselves in last place in the Central once again. Now, if there was any remaining hope from that 2008 season, it sure is gone now. The offense wasn't awful, as Billy Butler makes his first appearance in the notable players, along with DeJesus, who put up a good offensive season. But the pitching and defense were terrible. Zach Greinke was nowhere near as dominant as last year, and the closer Joakim Soria led the team in WAR, which is never a good sign. In the draft, the Royals took Cal State Fullerton infielder Christian Colon with the 4th overall pick. GM Dayton Moore once again did little at the trade deadline, and he only traded Rick Ankiel for a return of a few prospects. Manager Trey Hillman would be fired mid-season, and the team brought in Ned Yost to replace him. With the return to the basement of the AL Central, it was clear something needed to change. Dayton Moore knew that, and he had one of the most coveted starting pitchers in the league with just 2 years left on his contract, Zach Greinke. It was time to trade him. The Brewers ended up being the highest bidder, giving up 4 young controllable players. The package included Alcides Escobar, Lorenzo Cain, Jeremy Jeffress, and Jake Odorizzi. The Royals were often painted as the clear losers of the trade, but with what we know now, this is one of the biggest franchise-defining trades in Royals history. The main 2 pieces they got back were Escobar and Cain, 2 defensive first players that were both shining with athleticism. The Royals were often dead last, or at least close to last, in defensive metrics, and Dayton Moore knew that they needed to improve. Cain and Escobar played center field and shortstop, the 2 most important defensive positions other than catcher on the diamond. While they didn't project to be great hitters, they could provide immense value to a team that doesn't have a long-term answer in those positions. The Royals were young again, and they had more coming. They had 5 top prospects in the top 34 according to MLB Pipeline. Moustakas and Hosmer were expected to make their debuts sometime during the 2011 season after dominating in the minor leagues. The 2011 opening day lineup had plenty of new faces. A couple of free agents in Melky Cabrera and Jeff Francoeur filled out the outfield now. Alex Gordon was moved to the outfield as time was ticking for him to live up to the number 2 overall pick potential that he was drafted for. Luke Hochevar took over the number 1 spot in the rotation after Greinke left, but the former number 1 overall selection had yet to live up to his potential. A young Danny Duffy will get significant playing time in 2011 as the Royals are now in desperate need for pitching help. The bullpen is still locked down by Soria, but 2 rookies joined the back end. Their record may have finished at 71 and 91, but there was clear growth. Hosmer and Moustakas both debuted and brought a much-needed spark to the team, as calling up 2 of the league's top 10 prospects will do. The 21-year-old Hosmer hit to a 118 OPS plus in over 120 games and became one of the league's top young players. Joining those 2 was a young 21-year-old Venezuelan catcher, Salvador Perez, who was not a big-name prospect or anything, but put up solid numbers in 39 games in 2011. Alex Gordon finally had his breakout season. After battling injuries the past 2 seasons, he finally found his home in the outfield, winning a Gold Glove in his first year playing the position and finished 21st in MVP voting. In the offseason, Salvador Perez would sign a 5-year, $7 million extension with the team, with options that go up to 2019 with a max amount of $29 million. 2012 did not get off to a good start, though, as Perez went down with a knee injury while catching a bullpen in March and would miss the first half of the season. Alex Gordon would also sign a $37.5 million extension over 4 years later this season. Melky Cabrera was also traded to make room for Lorenzo Cain. The offense was coming together, but it still wasn't going to be there. The only additions to the opening day lineup were Lorenzo Cain and Brian Pena, who was filling in for the injured Perez. These 2 were not expected to pack that much of a punch in the order. The starting rotation was not looking that special going into the year. The bullpen, on the other hand, was beginning to take shape. Jonathan Broxton was brought in via free agency, and young flamethrower Kelvin Herrera was also added to the mix. Breakout rookie Greg Holland now has a back-end role on lock. It was pretty clear, pretty quickly, that the only strength on this team was the bullpen. The offense was led by Alex Gordon once again, putting up back-to-back Gold Glove winning seasons. Alcides Escobar played notably well too, especially on the defensive side. Salvador Perez was great after returning from injury, and the rookie Kelvin Herrera shined in his 84 innings of work. With a few notable injuries and an awful starting rotation, the team limped through the season. Billy Butler was the lone All-Star selection, and the Royals would finish once again below 500 with a record of 72-90. The decision to trade Melky Cabrera was looking pretty bad after he took home the All-Star MVP trophy, and Jeff Francoeur was sucking it up in right field. Kane played okay, but nowhere near Melky's level. Most of these guys were still young, and something was bound to click soon, right? Well, Dayton Moore knew that his time was ticking. He had been there for 6 years, and the Major League club had little to no success at this point. On December 9, 2012, Moore pulled the trigger on one of the bigger trades in franchise history, acquiring James Shields and Wade Davis from the Rays for a package including Will Myers and Jake Odorizzi. Myers at the time was a top 5 prospect according to MLB Pipeline, and Odorizzi cracked the top 50. The Royals were declared sure losers of this trade, and Moore was clearly desperate to win now. Many analysts suggest that they gave up their future just to hopefully crack 500 for the first time in 2013. The Royals needed pitching help, and All-Star James Shields sure will help along with Wade Davis, who was viewed as an average starting pitcher at the time. The uncertainties that the fans had with this trade, though, were soon to be diminished. 2013 was the first time ever that the opening day lineup had a team full of guys that were starters last year. That could be a good sign, or it could be a bad sign, but for the Royals, I would consider it to be a good sign. They finally had a core group of guys that they could count on, and they didn't feel the need to replace any of them. The pitching staff was also full of young, familiar faces. The additions of Wade Davis and James Shields immediately made this rotation look a lot better, and Ervin Santana was picked up for a player who never even made the majors. Luke Hochevar, who is now viewed as a consensus bust as the number 1 overall pick, looked to revive his career in the bullpen. Through the first half of the season, things were going as usual for Kansas City baseball, finishing up with a record of 43-49. But the second half would be a lot more exciting. On the backs of the breakouts of Eric Hosmer and Salvador Perez, along with James Shields and Ervin Santana putting up great numbers on the mound, the team was finally winning games. And not just a few here and there, they finished the second half with a record of 43-27. The bullpen was one of the best in the league, as Greg Holland, Kelvin Herrera, and Luke Hochevar were a dominant back three. While their pitching was a big reason why the ERA was down, the defense deserves some credit as well. The Royals had consistently been near last as a defensive team up until this point, and now they jumped up to 7th in defensive efficiency and were up there in other defensive metrics as well. Gordon won the Gold Glove, Salvi won the Gold Glove, and Kane and Escobar were great defensively in 2 defensively demanding positions. Dayton Moore's vision behind the Greinke trade was finally starting to come together. The 2 weak links in this lineup were veterans Jeff Francoeur and Chris Getz, so the Royals signed Omar Infante in free agency to play second and traded for Nori Aoki to play right. Now, these guys weren't expected to lead the offense, but they were there to play their roles. The core offensive core stayed together, and the pitching was still led by James Shields. Jason Vargas was brought in, and the 23-year-old Yordano Ventura carved himself a role in the rotation. The bullpen was expected to be dominant again. It would be without Luke Hochevar, though, who was good last year, but he underwent Tommy John surgery before the season started. It was clear that this team wasn't going to outslug you, but they would do all the little things, and sometimes that's all you have to do. The 2014 season started off slow for the Royals, going 29-31 in the first 60 games. It was looking like the momentum from last year was all but gone. But they played better up until the All-Star break, including a 10-game winning streak to put their record at 48-46. They would need another great second half in order to even have a chance at a run in the playoffs, and they did just that. They would rip off a 7-game win streak to kick off August, and that would lead the team to finish 19-10 in that month, setting themselves up for a playoff spot. The good play would continue all the way until September 26th, where the team sat at 87-72, 1 win away from clinching the playoffs. Now, for most competitive teams, this wouldn't be a huge story, but for the Royals, it would be the biggest thing to happen to the team since 1985. For 29 long years, the team hasn't seen any postseason action. It was the longest active playoff drought in North American sports and one of the longest in history. It looked like they were going to get in, though. They had 3 games left, and all they had to do was win one of them, and they were guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. They didn't waste any time. Jeremy Guthrie would start for the Royals, and he would get some early run support on the board, as in the first inning, the Royals scored 3 runs off the backs of a Nori Aoki triple, a Lorenzo Cain single, and a Billy Butler single. Guthrie then tossed one of his best games all year, as he went 7 shutout innings, allowing just 4 hits and striking out 6. He would then turn it over to maybe the most dominant bullpen duo in the 21st century of Wade Davis and Greg Holland. Holland would shut the door in the ninth, and just like that, the Royals were going to the postseason for the first time in 29 years. The Royals would finish 89-73, one game over the 88-win Athletics to secure home field advantage in the wildcard game, and that one game difference would turn out to be a pretty big deal for the Royals. The offense was once again led by Alex Gordon, and Lorenzo Cain had a great season alongside him. Perez, Hosmer, Aoki, and Escobar all had okay seasons. They finished dead last in home runs with just 95, but were top 5 in batting average, and they led the league in stolen bases with 153. And they were successful at an 81% clip, which is an elite level. Not only were they stealing a lot of bases, but they were doing it with great efficiency, in an era where the stolen base wasn't even used that much. The defense was once again great behind a solid rotation and elite bullpen. All of a sudden, the James Shields and Zach Greinke trades were looking better and better. The task was pretty simple for the Royals now: win the wildcard game. A one-game series, win or go home. Manager Ned Yost predictably gave the ball to his ace James Shields to get the job done, though it would be a rough start as Brandon Moss would jump on a Shields changeup and give the A's a 2-0 lead early. Billy Butler would respond against the A's ace John Lester to single home Nori Aoki after he stole second. In the bottom of the third, Moustakas singled, Cain doubled, and Hosmer singled to give the Royals the lead at 3-2. Shields would be dealing up until the 6th inning, where he would give up a single and a walk before Yordano Ventura was brought in to face Brandon Moss. Moss would strike the Royals again, this time for 3 runs, and all of a sudden, the lead was gone. Moss had his second homer of the game, and the A's now had a 2-run lead. But they weren't done. Ventura gave up a single and a wild pitch, then got a flyout. Kelvin Herrera would get the call from the pen, who would get 1 out, but then give up back-to-back-to-back singles, and the A's would have 7 runs by the end of the inning. The Royals went down in order in the 6th, and things were beginning to look bleak. Herrera would stay in the game and put up a 0 in the top of the 7th. Lester was on a roll now, and he would get through the 7th as well. Wade Davis would get a 1-2-3 top of the 8th, and the A's would decide to send John Lester back out there for the 8th, which would turn out to be a bad decision. Alcides Escobar would lead off with a single and a stolen base. Lorenzo Cain would single him home, and then he himself would steal second. Hosmer walked, and that would be it for Lester. Billy Butler would then single home Cain, and then be replaced by pinch-running extraordinaire Terrence Gore. Gore, of course, then stole second. Then a wild pitch allowed Hosmer to score to make it a 1-run ballgame. The Royals couldn't score Gore from third, taking it to the 9th. Closer Greg Holland would get the 9th inning, where he would walk the bases loaded. Then get Jed Lowry to line out to end the inning. All-star closer Sean Doolittle would then take over for the A's, looking for 3 outs to send the team to the ALDS. Josh Willingham would pinch hit for lefty Moustakas and would manage to get a single to lead off the inning. Former 50th round pick Gerard Dyson would then get the call to pinch run. He was bunted to second. Then, maybe in the riskiest play in Royals history, Dyson attempted to steal third. I mean, they got here with a stolen base. If they go out, they might as well die with a stolen base.
There goes Dyson. Throw to third. He is safe. The time.
Now, all they needed was a sac fly to get the job done, and Nori Aoki did just that to tie the game. Cain would line up at the shortstop to end the 9th, and the bullpens would shut down the 10th and 11th. But that would change in the top of the 12th as the A's were able to get 1 run home. Cain grounded out to begin the 12th. The Royals were now down to their final 2 outs. Eric Hosmer was able to hit a ball into left field and stretch it into a triple. Yes, even the first baseman on this team can run. Former first-round pick Christian Colon would then hit a ball practically off home plate, and Josh Donaldson was unable to make the play, making it a tie game. Alex Gordon popped out, and then, doing what the Royals do best, Christian Colon stole second base, making it the 7th stolen base for the game. Now, with the winning run on second, in stepped in Salvador Perez with the game on the line. All 162 games came down to this, and all 29 years of waiting came down to this 2-2 pitch.
Looking for a 2-out hit.
The Royals had done it. They won the wild-card game, sending them to face the first-seeded Angels, led by Mike Trout, who was basically on pace to become the best player of all time, in a best-of-5 series. Game 1 would be a pitcher's duel between Jason Vargas and Jared Weaver. Weaver went 7 innings, giving up just 2 runs, and Vargas went 6, while also surrendering 2 scores. The game was tied after 9 innings, and after 10 innings, but Mike Moustakas hit a solo home run to lead off the 11th. Greg Holland pitched a 1-2-3 bottom half, and the Royals had won Game 1. The bullpen pitched 5 shutout innings, and now the momentum was really on their side. Game 2 would be eerily similar to Game 1, but this time it was Yordano Ventura and Matt Shoemaker going at it on the mound. Both would only give up 1 run, and once again the game was tied after 9 innings, this time at 1-1. No runs were scored in the 10th, but once again in the top of the 11th, the Royals struck again, this time Eric Hosmer hitting a 2-run homer. Salvi added an insurance run with a single, and Greg Holland got the save again. The series now sits at 2-0 Royals, and just like that, they are going back home to Kansas City with a 2-0 series lead. They were going for the knockout blow, sending ace James Shields out in front of the home crowd. Shields came through and tossed 6 innings of 2-run ball, and the Royals jumped on C.J. Wilson in the first inning, scoring 3 runs and knocking him out of the game after just 2 outs recorded. The Angels were unable to recover, and just like that, the Royals are moving on to the ALCS, undefeated in the playoffs. They matched up with the Baltimore Orioles, who were polar opposites of the Royals. They led the league in homers, with over double the amount that the Royals had, and were dead last in stolen bases. But the Royals were already full steam ahead, on track to the World Series, and the Orioles couldn't do much about it. Game 1 would go to extras in a 6-6 game, and if you're playing the Royals in extra innings in a postseason game, you might as well just quit. In the top of the 10th, Gordon and Moustakas both hit solo shots, which would win them the game. Game 2 would also be tied going into the 9th at 4-4, but the Royals this time would score 2 runs in the top of the 9th, and Holland would once again close it down. The Royals now led the series 2-0 going back to Kansas City. We've seen this one before. Game 3 would be a low score. The Royals would get 2 runs from Butler and Gordon singles, and that is all they would need, as Jeremy Guthrie went 5 innings allowing just 1 run, and the bullpen pitched 4 perfect innings, not allowing a base runner. Game 4 would be another low score. The Royals got 2 runs in the first inning, but the pitching came through once again. Vargas, Herrera, Davis, and Holland allowed 4 hits and gave up just 1 run. Holland sent the team to the World Series, and the Royals were back. Most people thought they had no chance against the powerhouse Orioles, but the Royals went in and swept them handedly. The San Francisco Giants would be the National League representative in the World Series, and they were looking for their 3rd championship in just 5 seasons. They had been here before, and the Royals were quite the opposite, and that showed in Game 1. The Royals lost 7-1 going against one of the game's best pitchers in the postseason, Madison Bumgarner. James Shields was roughed up, allowing 5 runs to score. Game 2 was not the same, however. Yordano Ventura went 5 1/3, giving up 2 runs, then handing it to the familiar combination of Herrera, Davis, and Holland, who then shut the game down, allowing the Royals to win 7-2. In Game 3, they would get an early lead against Tim Hudson, making the score 3-0 by the 6th. The Giants would then score 2 runs off of starter Jeremy Guthrie, but once again, the bullpen didn't allow a run. Herrera, Brandon Finnegan, Davis, and Holland did the job. In Game 4, the Giants showed why they were there and put up 11 runs, making easy work of the Royals. The series was now tied at 2-2 going into a pivotal Game 5 matchup between Shields and Bumgarner, a rematch of Game 1. And just like Game 1, it had a similar result. Mad Bum threw a gem, a complete game shutout, and all the Royals could do was sit there and watch. The Giants scored 5 and won the game 5-0. Now facing elimination, Yordano Ventura was tasked with keeping the Royals alive, and he delivered, going 7 innings, allowing just 3 hits and striking out 5. The Royals gave Davis and Holland a rest, but the bullpen still threw up 2 zeros to win 10-0. Game 7, it all came down to this. The pitching matchup was Tim Hudson versus Jeremy Guthrie. Neither would last long though, as Guthrie gave up 3 runs in 3 innings and Hudson gave up 2 in just 2 innings. The Royals trailed 3-2. Kelvin Herrera would then pitch 3 shutout innings, Wade Davis would throw 2, and Holland would pitch a scoreless 9th. But on the other side, the Royals' worst nightmare happened. Madison Bumgarner came out of the pen in the 5th inning on just 2 days rest after throwing a complete game in Game 5. Mad Bum pitched all 5 innings, throwing 68 pitches, allowing just 2 hits, and shut out the Royals to win the game and the World Series, the 3rd in 5 years for the Giants. The Royals had come a long way, just 1 run away from hoisting the trophy, but they were just plain overmatched. Luckily for the Royals though, there's always next year, and the team had a lot of players returning too. Butler and Aoki were lost to free agency but were replaced with Alex Rios and Kendrys Morales. James Shields was the biggest loss on the pitching side as Edison Volquez signed after a good year in Pittsburgh. Luke Hochevar rejoined the bullpen after recovering from Tommy John. And surprising nobody, they had another great regular season. They won 95 games and had one of the best seasons in franchise history. Hosmer and Moustakas both found their power stroke, allowing the Royals to hit a few home runs this year. Lorenzo Cain was in the running for MVP after putting up a great season in center field. And this year, they didn't have to worry about the wildcard game. They were the number 1 seed. After their run as underdogs last year, they were now the favorites going into the postseason. The winners of the wildcard game were the Astros, and they had a young core of their own with Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, and George Springer leading the way. In Game 1, Ventura started, didn't last long, and the Astros cruised their way to a victory with a 5-2 win. In Game 2, the Royals' Johnny Cueto made his Royals postseason debut after they got him at the trade deadline, where the same deadline they also got Ben Zobrist, who is now the team's starting second baseman. After falling behind 3-0, Salvador Perez got the Royals on the board with a solo home run. In the 6th, Hosmer and Perez both got RBIs to tie the game at 4. Ben Zobrist would single in the 7th to give the Royals a 5-4 lead, and that is all they would need as Wade Davis closed the game. Greg Holland would no longer be closing games this year because of a torn UCL that he was diagnosed with in September. A huge blow to the Royals, but Davis was just as good as Holland and would serve as the closer for the postseason. Game 3 was back in KC, but the Royals couldn't get anything going on offense, and the only 2 runs came from solo shots from Gordon and Kane. And Dallas Keuchel of the Astros pitched a gem. They lost the game 4-2. Now the Royals found themselves in a win-or-go-home situation, needing to win the final 2 games to advance to the ALCS. Ventura took the mound in Game 4, allowing just 3 runners to score. Salvi hit a 2-run homer, but the Royals found themselves down 2-6 in the 8th inning after the bullpen gave up an additional 3 runs. With just 6 outs to work with, the Royals needed at least 4 runs to stay alive. And in true Royals fashion, the bats came alive late in the 8th as they recorded 5 straight singles and then an error by shortstop Carlos Correa. After that sequence, the game was tied, but not for long as Alex Gordon got an RBI groundout to give the Royals the lead 7-6. They would go on to win 9-6 after Hosmer hit a 2-run homer in the 9th. In true Royals fashion, they came back and won. Now the deciding Game 5 was the only thing left standing in the way between another ALCS appearance. Johnny Cueto got the ball for the Royals and McHugh for the Stros. Cueto pitched great in one of the most important games of his career as he threw 8 innings, striking out 8 and allowed 2 runs to score. The Royals got a run in the 4th and 3 in the 5th, then Kendrys Morales put the game to bed after his 3-run homer in the 8th inning. Now going back to the ALCS for the second straight year, this time they faced the Toronto Blue Jays with MVP Josh Donaldson leading the way. The Royals scored 2 runs off an Escobar double and a Kane single. Perez would make it 3-0 after a solo homer, and the pitching did the rest. Volquez went 6 shutout innings and then turned it over to the bullpen, who as usual shut the door. Game 1 went to the Royals 5-0. Game 2 was a tough one for the Royals to start. David Price had thrown 6 shutout innings leading up to the 7th, and the score was 3-0. But the Royals' offense exploded in the 7th, scoring 5 runs, which would give them the win 6-3. Game 3 was not as fruitful though, as they found themselves down 10-4 and tried to come back, but ultimately fell short, with the game ending at 11-8. The Royals still had the lead in the series though at 2-1, and Game 4 was the opposite of Game 5, as the Royals won 14-2. Game 5, the Blue Jays got their revenge and won 7-1, with Marco Estrada pitching a gem into the 8th inning. The Royals now went back to KC and just had to win one of the 2 games to win the series. Yordano Ventura started and went into the 6th, allowing just 1 run, adding to his many great outings in the postseason. Zobrist hit a homer in the 1st, and Moustakas hit one in the 2nd as the Royals jumped out to an early lead. Jose Bautista would get 1 run back with a homer off of Ventura. Alex Rios singled in Moustakas in the 7th to make it a 2-run game. Jose Bautista would then respond with another home run, this time a 2-run homer off of Ryan Madsen, who was filling in the 8th inning role after Holland went down. Kane walked to lead off the 8th and Hosmer singled. Somehow, in peak Royals fashion, Lorenzo Cain scored from first on the single with no outs.
First, now Kane coming to the plate. Royals lead.
That run would then be the difference as Wade Davis shut down the 9th inning, of course, for the win. And with that, the Royals won their 2nd pennant in as many years. The stage was set for another World Series, this time against the Mets. Game 1, the Royals saw Matt Harvey, who had pitched to a sub-3 ERA in the regular season and had pitched great in the postseason. Alcides Escobar would start off the series with a bang. Off the first pitch the Royals saw, he hit a home run. Not just a normal home run, a home run in the Royals style, an inside-the-park home run. From there, Volquez would give up 3 runs, but the Royals would get them right back in the 6th, and Eric Hosmer error would allow the go-ahead run to score in the 8th. Going into the 9th, down 1, Alex Gordon stepped to the plate.
Gordon in the air to center. Back at the wall. This game is tied.
The game was now tied and would stay that way until the 14th inning, where Hosmer hit a sac fly to score the winning run. You don't want to go to extras against the Royals in the playoffs. When will they learn? Game 2 saw Johnny Cueto top his performance from the ALDS as he pitched a complete game, leading the Royals to a 7-1 victory. Game 3 saw a rough outing from Yordano Ventura as he gave up 5 runs. Franklin Morales would then give up 4 coming out of the pen, and the offense wasn't enough to surmount that 9-run lead. The Royals were able to muster 3 runs off of Noah Syndergaard to make it a final score of 3-9. Although it was a loss, the Royals were still up in the series 2-1 heading into Game 4. And in Game 4, the Royals fell victim to a Michael Conforto home run and a Curtis Granderson sac fly in the 3rd, but were able to rebound offensively with an Alex Gordon single in the 5th. Conforto went yard again in the bottom of the inning. In the 6th, Kane singled home a run to make it 2-3. Then, in the 8th, the offense would finally explode in true Royals style by reaching on an error and back-to-back singles from Moustakas and Perez to score 3 runs to take the lead 5-3, which would end up being the final score. Now just 1 game away from glory. It wouldn't come easy though. Game 5 was a low score with Edison Volquez going against Mets ace Matt Harvey. Curtis Granderson would get it started with a homer in the bottom of the 1st, and after that the 2 starters would deal up until the 6th inning when Volquez got into a bit of trouble and surrendered a sac fly by Lucas Duda. Matt Harvey had a shutout working until the 9th inning, until a walk and stolen base by Kane and a Hosmer double. Harvey was then taken out, much to his disliking, and Hosmer was moved to 3rd by a ground out. This led to possibly the most iconic moment from this series.
Broken back. Cut off by Wright. Out, throw home. Royal tie game. Unbelievable base running by Eric Hosmer.
The 10th would go by, the 11th would go by, and it was still knotted at 2. In the 12th, Perez singled, was pinch ran for by Dyson, who then stole 2nd immediately, as he does. Alex Gordon grounded out, which gave Christian Colon a chance to take the lead.
To the postseason. Colon delivers into left. Into scores Dyson. And Kansas City is on top 3-2.
Escobar and Kane would both double, then to extend the lead to 7-2. Wade Davis then, of course, came in to shut it down, one last time. He struck out Lucas Duda. He struck out Travis d'Arnaud. Now the team was just 1 out away from winning the World Series. A team without a true superstar in the lineup. A team without a dominant ace leading the rotation. A team with a bullpen that contained a group of guys that always worked together and seemed to never blow a game. A team with guys like Hosmer, Perez, Kane, and Gordon, all the way down to the unsung heroes like Gerard Dyson and Terrence Gore doing whatever they were asked, coming in on defense, coming in to steal a base. A team filled with unselfish players. A team where nobody was looking to pad their own stats. A team that was looking at one common goal. And after 30 long years, that goal was finally achieved.
The 1-2 again.